Action cinema has always promised explosive finales, the kind where every conflict detonates in a blaze of spectacle. But what if the climactic moment you remember wasn't the ending the filmmakers originally intended? What if the true finale was quietly rewritten, reshaped, or erased because the star at the center of the film demanded a different outcome? During the height of the action movie era, particularly from the late 80s through the early 2000s, a handful of leading men held a level of influence that could bend the narrative to their will. And when these actors weren't satisfied with how their stories concluded, entire film endings were altered to satisfy their vision. Some actors refused to let their characters die under any circumstance. Others disliked being portrayed with emotional fragility or moral doubt. A few rejected ideas that made their on-screen persona appear compromised, conflicted, or anything less than invincible. In some cases, studios spent massive amounts of money reshooting final acts simply because the star believed the original ending didn't align with the heroic image they had cultivated for years. These weren't minor tweaks, they transformed the meaning, tone, and emotional impact of the entire film. What audiences received in theaters was often a sanitized version of what was meant to be. Buried endings included brutal defeats, tragic sacrifices, devastating losses, or shocking twists that would have changed how the audience remembered these characters forever. But those versions never made it past the editing room. Today, we're opening the door to the endings that were rewritten for one reason: the lead actor wanted something different. These are 15 action films where the star stepped in and changed the final outcome, rewiring the narrative, reshaping the climax, and altering the destiny of their characters in ways the world was never meant to see. Fact 1. Marked for Death, 1990. When Marked for Death was initially crafted, its finale was far grimmer than what audiences eventually saw. The early concept painted John Hatcher as a man bearing the emotional fallout of years spent immersed in violence. The script's intended conclusion showed Hatcher winning the physical battle but collapsing under the psychological cost, leaving viewers with an image of a man spiritually drained rather than triumphant. It was meant to underline that even heroes cannot outrun the consequences of their choices, but Steven Seagal refused to let the character end in such a fractured state. By 1990, Seagal had already established a very specific on-screen persona: a stoic warrior immune to fear, doubt, or emotional collapse. A finale portraying Hatcher as damaged or weakened clashed with the sharp, authoritative image Seagal believed audiences expected. Crew members later recalled that the actor strongly resisted any suggestion that his character should appear emotionally vulnerable, arguing that the role needed to project unwavering strength. The studio, recognizing Seagal's rising star power, sided with him. The dramatic breakdown originally scripted for the final scene was removed. Any internal turmoil was replaced by confidence and certainty. The ending became a clean, almost surgically precise display of heroism. The villain is defeated, justice is restored, and Hatcher walks away without a single crack in his armor. The film's emotional foundation shifted entirely. Instead of exploring the toll that violence takes on the human spirit, the final cut reinforces the myth of the invincible action hero. Hatcher's deeper struggle, once central to the story's purpose, was erased to preserve a carefully curated cinematic identity. What remained was not the ending envisioned by its writers, but the one permitted by its star. Fact 2. The Glimmer Man, 1996. The earliest drafts of The Glimmer Man envisioned a climactic showdown that forced Jack Cole to confront the shadows of his violent past. In this version, the film culminated with the death of its central antagonist, a symbolic act meant to sever Cole from the life he once lived. It was a conclusion steeped in moral conflict, intended to highlight how redemption sometimes requires painful choices. Steven Seagal rejected the idea immediately. During this era, Seagal increasingly shaped his characters around themes of spirituality and restraint. Executing the villain outright contradicted the image he was eager to project: a figure who had risen above brutality and embraced a more enlightened path. Reports from the production suggest that Seagal insisted the ending emphasize compassion rather than vengeance. The killer, he argued, should survive not as an act of mercy toward the villain, but as a reflection of Cole's supposed wisdom. The creative team was forced to rework the entire final act. The emotionally charged confrontation originally planned was softened, minimizing the character's internal struggle. Instead of delivering justice through lethal force, Cole chooses to withhold it. The revised ending reframed him not as a man wrestling with inner demons, but as a patient, enlightened hero who refuses to let violence define him. This shift fundamentally altered the film's thematic center. The intended climax, a moment of decisive moral reckoning, became a subdued, almost anticlimactic beat shaped entirely by Seagal's personal philosophy. Viewers were left with an ending that felt strangely restrained, lacking the weight the story had been building toward. The result served the image of its leading actor far more than the narrative it was meant to complete. Fact 3. Fire Down Below, 1997. In its original form, Fire Down Below carried one of the bleakest conclusions of Steven Seagal's 90s film career. The script's ending presented Jack Taggart as a man overwhelmed not just by the corruption he uncovers, but by the sense of helplessness that follows. Early versions depicted Taggart facing a crushing emotional collapse after realizing how deeply the environmental destruction and political manipulation ran. One iteration even hinted at a quiet, symbolic self-destruction, not explicitly shown but unmistakably implied through its tone. Seagal refused to allow any such interpretation of the character. Determined to maintain his image as an unwavering force for justice, Seagal rejected any ending that left Taggart broken or defeated. According to people involved in the production, Seagal pushed for a complete overhaul, no despair, no psychological unraveling, and certainly no suggestion of self-harm. He insisted the character embody resilience and moral clarity, even in the face of impossible odds. The rewrites transformed the film's emotional core. The dark, pessimistic finale intended to expose the futility of fighting powerful corporate interest was replaced with a traditional hero's victory. Evidence once destroyed became recoverable. Threats once insurmountable were neutralized. Instead of crumbling under the weight of what he had witnessed, Taggart emerges centered, composed, and victorious. What the audience ultimately saw was a sanitized, optimistic conclusion that fit Seagal's heroic brand, but stripped the story of its original message. The bleak realism intended by the writers gave way to a clean triumph engineered to protect the star's image. Fact 4. Showdown in Little Tokyo, 1991. When Showdown in Little Tokyo was first scripted, its central character, Chris Kenner, was designed with a dark secret meant to emerge in the final act. The original ending revealed that Kenner had once cooperated, however reluctantly, with the same criminal faction he was now hunting. The twist would have forced him to confront his own tainted past, transforming the final showdown into a deeply personal reckoning rather than a straightforward clash between hero and villain. It was a bold choice meant to give the movie an unexpected emotional punch. Dolph Lundgren wanted no part of it. Throughout his career, Lundgren's action roles leaned heavily on the idea of absolute integrity. Tough, imposing men with unwavering moral centers. Playing a character whose past included betrayal even under pressure clashed with that identity. Behind the scenes, Lundgren firmly rejected any ending suggesting Kenner had ever stood on the wrong side of the law. The creative team was told that the twist compromised the character's honor and would confuse audiences expecting a clear-cut hero. The writers were forced to eliminate the subplot entirely. Gone was the internal conflict, replaced with a more traditional revenge-driven arc highlighting Kenner's trauma and righteousness. The final confrontation no longer reflected moral ambiguity. It simply became a one-sided victory against a villain with no deeper connection to the hero than past violence. The alteration shifted the film's thematic direction. Instead of confronting guilt and redemption, the narrative leaned into simplicity. Kenner as an avenger, unblemished and unburdened. What could have been a layered, psychologically charged finale was reworked to maintain Lundgren's preferred heroic image, sacrificing depth for clarity. Fact 5. The Patriot, 1998. Originally, The Patriot was shaped as a somber survival drama ending on a note of heavy loss. Early drafts of the film's conclusion depicted Dr. Wesley McLaren worn down by the epidemic ravaging the region. Though he manages to slow the spread of the virus, the original ending made clear that he could not save everyone. Loved ones were lost, and the final scene showed McLaren standing alone, emotionally hollowed by the devastation around him. It was meant to remind viewers that even heroes are not immune to despair. Steven Seagal rejected this direction completely. By this stage in his career, Seagal was determined to present characters rooted in resilience and unshakable moral strength. A protagonist left broken or grieving, conflicted with the serene, controlled persona he wanted his audience to associate with. Production accounts suggest that Seagal insisted the script remove any hint of irreversible trauma. Instead of a man haunted by failure, he wanted McLaren to symbolize hope and unwavering fortitude. Rewrites reshaped the film's tone from bleak to restorative. Scenes where McLaren struggled emotionally were cut. A somber ending showing the cost of the crisis was replaced by a finale in which the community recovers and McLaren walks away renewed. The sense of irreversible loss, originally intended as the film's emotional backbone, was replaced with triumph and reassurance. The result is a fundamentally different movie from the one the writers conceived. What was meant to be a haunting meditation on sacrifice became a conventional action hero victory, tailored to protect the star's image rather than preserve the story's original emotional impact. Fact 6. On Deadly Ground, 1994. In its earliest form, On Deadly Ground was meant to end with a sobering dose of realism. The script portrayed Forrest Taft as a skilled but ultimately outmatched man, fighting against a corporate machine too immense to topple. The planned finale showed Taft losing the battle the oil company causes catastrophic ecological destruction, and Taft is forced to confront the painful truth that even righteous men cannot always win. The ending was bleak, but grounded, reinforcing the story's environmental warning. Steven Seagal rejected the idea instantly. Around this time, Seagal's on-screen persona was evolving into something larger than life, an enlightened warrior embodying spiritual and moral superiority. Allowing Taft to fail, even in a symbolic sense, contradicted everything Seagal wanted the character to represent. Reports from production state that Seagal insisted the ending be rewritten to show Taft achieving complete victory and delivering a clear moral message to the public. The revised finale transformed the film into something entirely different. Taft not only defeats the villains, but also stands before an audience to deliver a lengthy speech on environmental ethics, a moment many viewers found strikingly out of place. The shift from gritty realism to triumphant preaching was driven entirely by the star's desire to portray his character as a flawless, enlightened crusader. Consequently, the emotional complexity originally built into the story evaporated. The final cut trades subtlety for certainty, realism for idealism, and nuance for a message crafted to align with Seagal's personal values. Fact 7. Hard Target, 1993. Before Hard Target became the stylish, high-energy action spectacle fans know today, John Woo had envisioned a finale steeped in tragedy and emotional exhaustion. In his original plan, Chance Boudreaux survives the final hunt, but not without severe consequences. The intended ending showed him battered, guilt-ridden, and haunted by the carnage he couldn't prevent. It was a classic Woo conclusion. The hero wins the fight, but loses a part of his soul in the process. Jean-Claude Van Damme had no intention of portraying that kind of vulnerability. At the height of his stardom, Van Damme was exceptionally protective of his image. His characters could suffer, but never to the point of appearing broken or defeated. According to several accounts from set personnel, Van Damme pushed firmly against any ending that left Chance looking emotionally wounded or morally uncertain. He wanted the climax to amplify his strength, not his fragility. Because of this, Wu and the writers were pushed to lighten the film's emotional weight. Scenes that once emphasized the cost of violence were reduced or eliminated. Instead of staggering away from the final fight, Chance emerges confident, stylish, and fully in control, very much in line with the charismatic, indestructible persona Van Damme cultivated throughout the 90s. The ending still delivers Wu's signature explosive action, but without the emotional scars originally intended. What could have been a haunting operatic finish became a victory molded to fit the star's preferred identity. Fact 8. Death Warrant. 90. The earliest version of Death Warrant pushed the story toward a darker, more unsettling resolution. Detective Louis Burke, after uncovering the horrific experiments inside the prison, was originally written to escape with his life, but not his peace of mind. The script's intended finale emphasized how deeply the system's corruption ran, leaving Burke uncertain whether justice had truly been served. The villainy wasn't fully defeated, and the conspiracy's architects remained powerful, casting a long shadow over the closing moments. Jean-Claude Van Damme rejected that ending immediately. Van Damme was shaping a track record of characters who always overcame insurmountable odds. A finale suggesting Burke failed to dismantle the evil he discovered didn't align with the victorious tone he wanted his audience to associate with him. Those familiar with the project later revealed that Van Damme insisted the ending be rewritten, so the villain's downfall was absolute, no loose ends, no ambiguity, no lingering moral uncertainty. The rewrite shifted the entire emotional direction of the conclusion. Villains who were originally meant to escape accountability were swiftly eliminated. The conspiracy that once remained untouched is dismantled instead. Burke doesn't walk away burdened or conflicted. He strides out triumphant, the prison's darkest secrets exposed and its masterminds defeated. The change flattened the thematic complexity of the ending. What had been designed as a commentary on institutional corruption became a straightforward action triumph engineered to preserve the star's heroic aura. Fact 9. Maximum Risk. 1996. The original ending of Maximum Risk was conceived as a somber, introspective conclusion to a story built on identity loss and psychological trauma. Alain Moreau, shattered by the revelation of his twin brother's secret life, was scripted to confront the corrupt forces responsible only to emerge physically wounded and emotionally undone. The ending was intentionally left ambiguous, reflecting the idea that closure doesn't always come cleanly, even when the truth is uncovered. Jean-Claude Van Damme pushed back against this version. During production, Van Damme made it clear that the finale needed to present Alain not as a broken man, grappling with irreparable trauma, but as a resolute hero who conquers both his enemies and his inner turmoil. A wounded, conflicted protagonist didn't fit the brand Van Damme had cultivated. The filmmakers were asked to reshape the climax to emphasize Alain's strength and decisiveness rather than his vulnerability. As a result, the original finale was significantly altered. Scenes depicting Alain's emotional collapse were trimmed or removed. The fight choreography was intensified to show him overpowering the villains in a clean, definitive manner. Instead of staggering away uncertain about what comes next, Alain walks into the final scene with renewed clarity, his victory unquestioned and his emotional burden noticeably lightened. The revised ending trades psychological depth for traditional heroism. What was once a meditation on grief becomes a more conventional action finale, one shaped not by narrative intent, but by the demands of its leading man. Fact 10. Lethal Weapon 4. 1998. When early drafts of Lethal Weapon 4 were completed, the story's finale carried a heavier emotional weight than the version chosen for release. One of the original concepts had either Riggs or Murtaugh paying a steep price during the final confrontation with the Triads, suffering a catastrophic injury that would forever alter the future of the franchise. The tone leaned toward realism. These men were aging, worn by decades of danger, and the ending was meant to underline that their luck could not last forever. But the leading duo didn't agree with that direction. Mel Gibson and Danny Glover were deeply attached to the characters they had shaped over more than a decade. Both believed the series should close on a note of unity, not tragedy. Gibson reportedly argued that Riggs had already endured enough emotional hardship and deserved an ending of hope rather than loss. Glover favored a conclusion that honored the theme of family that had grown central to the series. Their influence steered the production away from the darker path. The emotional stakes of the finale were softened, and scenes hinting at potential character death were removed or rewritten. Instead of a somber hospital sequence filled with grief and uncertainty, the ending became warm, celebratory, and filled with life. Family photos, comedic relief, and heartfelt resolutions replaced the original plan for a sobering farewell. The rewrite ensured that the film served as a comforting conclusion rather than a dramatic one, reshaping the franchise's final note through the power of its stars. Fact 11. Tango and Cash, 1989. The chaotic behind-the-scenes journey of Tango and Cash produced numerous rewrites, and the film's ending was among the most dramatically altered elements. The earliest vision for the finale was grittier and more morally ambiguous, aligning with the tone of late 80s crime thrillers. In that version, Ray Tango and Gabe Cash infiltrate the villain's compound, only to confront layers of corruption that survive long after the final battle. One antagonist escapes, and the heroes walk away victorious, but shaken, unsure of whether they achieved anything lasting. Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell didn't want that kind of ending. Stallone, known for reshaping scripts to suit his preferred heroic image, reportedly requested a more triumphant finish. Russell supported a lighter and more humorous tone to capitalize on the duo's chemistry. As a result, the finale was rewritten into a cleaner, more optimistic showdown, one where the villains are neatly eliminated. The chaos is fully resolved, and the heroes step back into the world with confidence and swagger. The darker thematic elements were stripped away. Gone was the noir-inspired bleakness. Gone was the sense of systemic corruption that couldn't be overcome. Instead, audiences were given a buddy cop victory full of explosive action, punchy one-liners, and celebratory camaraderie. The ending became a reflection not of the story's original direction, but of the leading actor's desire for a fun, energizing payoff. Fact 12. Sudden Death, 1995. Sudden Death originally carried a conclusion that highlighted the emotional devastation of surviving a large-scale disaster. In early drafts, Darren McCord saves many lives, but not nearly all of them. The script portrayed him stumbling out of the arena exhausted and emotionally crushed, haunted by the people he couldn't reach in time. It was a raw, realistic portrayal of trauma fitting for a character who had already been scarred by tragedy. But Jean-Claude Van Damme opposed this tone. Van Damme was firmly building his cinematic legacy around heroes who stood strong in the face of chaos. A protagonist walking away shaken and guilt-ridden contradicted the powerful, composed image he preferred. According to those familiar with the production, Van Damme urged the writers to remove any hint of lasting emotional damage. McCord needed to win without carrying the weight of failure. The final act underwent substantial revision. Scenes emphasizing casualties and psychological trauma were pared back. McCord's original breakdown was scrapped entirely. Instead, the climax highlights his tactical brilliance and determination, culminating in the rescue of his children and a stable, victorious exit. The rewritten ending trades emotional realism for a cleaner, more uplifting finish, turning what was meant to be a cautionary tale about trauma into another celebration of Van Damme's action hero invincibility. Fact 13. The Expendables, 2010. When The Expendables was first assembled on paper, its finale carried a far more somber tone than the final product. The earliest iterations of the script included the death of a key team member during the climactic battle, a narrative choice meant to underline the brutal reality of mercenary life. The sacrifice was designed to hit hard, showing that even elite fighters aren't immune to the cost of war. The moment would have added emotional gravity to the franchise's explosive energy. However, the cast's leading figures, particularly Sylvester Stallone, didn't want the film to move in that direction. As both the director and centerpiece of the ensemble, Stallone envisioned The Expendables as a celebration of brotherhood and high-octane heroism. According to those familiar with the development process, he felt that killing a team member in the first installment would fracture the unity that audiences were meant to connect with. Some cast members also preferred maintaining the team's sense of invincibility, emphasizing camaraderie over tragedy. The script was revised with a lighter touch. The planned death scene was removed, replaced with a triumphant finale where the entire squad survives the mission. The victory is framed as a testament to their loyalty and skill, culminating in the team sharing drinks and humor rather than grief and regret. The resulting ending reflects the collective influence of its star ensemble, reshaping what began as a gritty, emotionally charged conclusion into a more uplifting and franchise-friendly finale. Fact 14. Universal Soldier. The Return. 1999. In its earliest blueprint, Universal Soldier, The Return sought to confront the psychological consequences of resurrection and warfare. Luke Devereaux's arc was originally meant to conclude with him confronting the painful truth that he could never fully restore his lost humanity. The intended ending portrayed him barely surviving the showdown with SETH, emotionally shattered by the revelation that he remained more machine than man. It was a tragic and introspective finale, echoing the darker tone of the original film. But Jean-Claude Van Damme had no interest in closing the story on such a bleak note. By this time in his career, Van Damme was actively leaning away from characters burdened by torment. He wanted Devereaux to overcome not just the antagonist, but also the internal struggle the script originally emphasized. According to accounts from the creative team, Van Damme advocated for a more triumphant resolution, one where Devereaux emerges as a fully realized hero rather than a tragic figure caught between humanity and programming. The ending underwent significant changes. Scenes that highlighted Devereaux's psychological fracture were eliminated. The previously somber conclusion was replaced with a more traditional action movie victory. Devereaux destroys. SETH rescues the innocent and walks into the aftermath with renewed purpose. The introspective grief that once defined the story's final beat vanished entirely. The revised ending shifts the tone from existential tragedy to heroic resurgence, reshaped specifically to align with Van Damme's preferred image. Fact 15. Out for Justice. 1991. The original vision for Out for Justice offered a far more morally complex portrait of Detective Gino Felino. Early drafts framed Felino's pursuit of Richie Madano as a descent into obsession, a path that gradually blurred the line between justice and recklessness. The intended finale depicted Felino killing Richie in a fit of uncontrolled rage, then facing internal scrutiny that suggested his badge and perhaps even his freedom were in jeopardy. This ending was meant to challenge the audience's perception of Felino's righteousness. Steven Seagal refused to adopt such a portrayal. Seagal strongly believed in maintaining the ethical clarity of his characters. A protagonist who loses control or invites legal consequences directly contradicted the steadfast, morally unshakable persona he consistently cultivated. Reports from production insiders indicate that Seagal pressed hard for an ending that absolved Felino of all wrongdoing. The script was altered to remove any notion of excessive force misconduct or emotional instability. As a result, the finale became far more straightforward. Felino confronts Richie in a decisive showdown, kills him in a manner framed as righteous and justified, and walks away without facing any consequences. The internal investigation subplot was discarded, along with any scenes suggesting that Felino's methods were ethically questionable. The revised ending replaces moral ambiguity with a clean, triumphant resolution, reflecting not the complexity of the narrative's original structure, but the star's determination to preserve his heroic identity. Bonus fact: the hero who refused to bleed. Among the strangest cases of altered film endings sits an action star whose demands reshaped the conclusion for reasons that had nothing to do with story or character arc. In the film's original screenplay, the final scene depicted the protagonist staggering away from the climax, bruised, bloodied, and visibly shaken, a realistic reflection of the brutal fight he had just endured. The imagery was meant to underscore the physical toll of violence and give the audience a rare glimpse of vulnerability in a genre that often avoids it. But the lead actor refused to accept the idea. According to crew members who worked closely on the production, the star insisted that the hero must appear absolutely untouched in the final frame. No torn clothing, no blood, no dirt, not even a scratch. The request seemed excessive to the makeup team, who had already prepared prosthetics and practical effects meant to create a gritty, grounded moment. Directors initially pushed back, arguing that removing the visible aftermath would weaken the realism of the scene. The actor didn't budge. As a result, the ending underwent an abrupt overhaul. The planned walkaway shot, once filled with exhaustion and physical damage, was rewritten into a clean, almost surreal tableau. The hero stands tall, victorious, and impossibly pristine, as though the entire battle required little effort. The visual storytelling shifted from vulnerability to invincibility, serving the actor's personal brand rather than the emotional tone originally intended for the film. The rewritten ending stands today as a prime example of how star power can override narrative logic, turning what should have been a grounded human moment into an almost mythic display of indestructibility. You've just seen how drastically these films could have ended, and how the power of a single actor can reshape the final moments of an entire story. Now, it's your turn. Which altered ending surprised you the most? And is there a version you wish had stayed in the film instead of being rewritten? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective helps uncover even more hidden stories. If you enjoy exploring the secret history of action cinema, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. There are still many endings left to uncover,